Ladies and gentlemen, the Newton Nomadic Theater presents Story Slam.
I'll bet you didn't know I was a daredevil. And that my personal email handle is Stormwriter. And when people get their first email from my Stormwriter account, lots of times they say to me, does that name come from the Doors song, Riders on the Storm? And I have to say, not even close. And then I tell them this story. When I was a little kid, I used to like to sit on the couch in my parents' living room and stare out the window and watch the weather. Now I know that sounds really boring, right? There's little Ellen sitting on the couch, looking out the window, watching it rain. Well, every once in a while, in the midst of a rainstorm, a lightning bolt would flash. And I was fascinated by lightning, by its power, its majesty, the suddenness of a flash that would come out of the sky and then disappear in an instant. And from that day to this, lightning has been my favorite element in weather. I started to collect lightning bolts. I got lightning bolt earrings, lightning bolt necklaces, I got a lightning bolt tattoo, clothing, anything that I could find that had a lightning bolt on it. Now roll my life forward several years when I had my son. He's now 30. He was about 9 or 10 years old. And he started reading the X-Men comics. Now he was really into X-Men. He used to tell me the stories of the powers of all these X-Men, particularly Wolverine, who was his favorite. And right around that same time, someone gave my son an X-Men action figure for his birthday, which happened to be Storm. Now I don't know if you know who Storm is, but she's got chalk white hair, she wears a skin-tight black jumpsuit, and right here in the middle of her chest is a lightning bolt. And the action figure had a little lever on the back, and when you pushed it, the lightning bolt would light up. Now my son didn't want to have anything to do with an action figure that was a girl, so he offered it to me, and Storm made the perfect addition to my lightning bolt collection. So many years after that, a friend of mine invited me to go mountain biking, and I had never been mountain biking. Of course, I had been riding bikes since I was 5 years old, so that sounded like a really fun time. Get on a fat tire bike, go out to the woods and tool around on the trails. So I said yes, and he had an extra mountain bike, so he put me on it and took me out into the woods. And I took to mountain biking immediately. It became my sport. I loved it. I got myself a Specialized rock hopper mountain bike, which was purple. And the insignia for Specialized bikes happens to be a lightning bolt. So on the stem of the bike, which is right underneath where the handlebars are, was a yellow lightning bolt. It was just totally cool. And I decided at one point that I was going to name my mountain bike. I had to come up with a name. So of course I was thinking about things that I like in life and things that inspire me. And I decided to name my mountain bike Storm. Now Storm and I had lots of fun together. I used to be known for being the daredevil, breakneck speed, downhill mountain biker. I would go down hills as fast as I could and then skid to a halt at the end. What a rush. I also joined Wombats, which was the Women on Mountain Bike and Tea Society. And we used to do a lot of fun things. One time, a group of about 20 of us got together, and we went up into the Middlesex Fells, and we wore pajamas over our riding clothes, and it was midnight and there was a full moon, and the only person in the pack who had a headlamp was the leader. It was dangerous, it was daring, and it was way too much fun. Now I forgot to tell you that Storm was tricked out. As I said, she was a purple mountain bike, and I bought an aftermarket front fork which had a shock absorber that was turquoise. And in those days, shock absorbers were kind of new on mountain bikes. And I had a gel saddle, so it was nice and comfy, and a saddlebag that had a cool tool for trailside repairs, and an extra tube in case I got a flat tire on the trail. So I just loved mountain biking. So sometime later, but still around the same time in my life, it was time for me to open up an email account. And being like the kind of person who likes to sound cool, right? I had to think of a handle for my email address. And again, I thought about things that influenced me in my life and what I loved. I thought about my mountain bike Storm. I thought about lightning that I love so much. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, like a flash of lightning, it hit me. I was Storm Rider. So from that day to this, my personal email handle has been Storm Rider. Now, several years ago, I had to hang up my mountain biking helmet because the wear and tear of the sport was too much for my knees and I had to give it up. And eventually, I'd say about 7 years ago, I donated Storm to Bikes Not Bonds. And I was really sad that day because Storm had meant so much to me, but I knew it would be better for her to be with a new owner riding on new trails than gathering dust and cobwebs in my garage. So, every time you see me up here introducing a library program like I just did, looking mostly professional, poised and somewhat cultured, remember, beneath that exterior lies one-time daredevil mountain biker named Storm Rider.
So, I put on a little card there that this is more like Into the Blue. Place I used to like to call home in Maine, had a front yard that was a barren of blueberries. A barren, boy, that really like a bomb. And I'm not sure why they call blueberry fields barrens, but I feel like a rich Baron von Blueberry having all those rich jewels there at my fingertips. And I can't even make a dent in what's out there, but trying to is a favorite ritual. From the time they're ripening in July to how long they're hanging on in August, I'm out there picking for my breakfast in another little box for my freezer. So, and the crop really varies from year to year. Sometimes it's really a bountiful year, and sometimes it prompts the locals to proclaim best blueberry season yet, which is the name of the story. 17 years ago, my wife and I had a bumper crop of a daughter. And from the time Jillian was eating solid foods, a favorite of hers, and still it is, blueberries. And because of when she started to eat solid foods, it was almost a full calendar year, like 11 months, where blueberries always came from one place. Same place, the freezer. So the time I was actually able to introduce her to a real live blueberry was a momentous occasion. So allow me to try to offer you a little snapshot of Jillian's initiation into blueberry heaven. And you have to picture a blueberry bush from the perspective of a 15-month-old. And I'm not talking about the high bush blueberries, I'm talking about the low ones of the barrens. I mean, but even to a little kid, it's like a tree just dripping with blue drops. And so I model for her, you know, picking one and putting it in my mouth, and I put one in her mouth. And up to that time, she thought she knew what a blueberry was. And they came in either two forms. They either came as icy and hard, or mushy and thawed. But this one was like warm from the sun, and it was taut, and it rolled around in her mouth. And when she gummed it, the flavor just exploded, and the blue in her eyes just like sparkling, rivaling the sky. You know, it was amazing. And now she knew what a blueberry was. And she was like a little bear cub and going after herself, a little pause there. And she's like, it was really funny watching her, but she's getting some, and a lot of other things too. The ones that have gone by, the little shriveled up kind of blueberry raisins, and then what I call the greeny weenies, and all kinds of miscellaneous roughage is going in there too. And and every once in a while she might, however much fun it used to be picking by myself, it paled in comparison to picking with her now. Every once in a while I'd stop. And I'd, put her on my back, and we'd take a break, and I'd play horsey with my little blueberry, cowgirl, and then I'd make up songs like, blueberries are ripe again, blueberries are ripe again, blueberries are ripe again, we're gonna pick a quart, you go ahead and eat them while I put them in this box. When it's all filled up, we'll put them in our socks. The song's really stupid, but we're having a great time. And every once in a while, she might donate a blueberry to my box. But what's the point of that? If you're gonna eat it, why. And actually, she'd much rather dip into my box, which is a genteel way of describing it, because she was more like a front-end loader. She's got this 5-tine claw, and she just slams her fist into the blue there fast, and just shoves it into her gaping maw. So to make any headway against her plundering, I have to come up with a strategy, and I come up with a pretty good one.
And I put, it's kind of scrubby out there, so I put her in the comfort of my lap, and I flunk her right in front of a really great little blueberry bush there, and she's happy picking her own. And so, and to keep her from picking mine, I put my box behind my back, so she can't get it. And this creates a really rather challenging picking position for her old man, because I really got to work for my berries. Contorting myself, and which gave rise to what I call my favorite movement meditation, which I call harvest yoga. Well, eventually I actually managed to fill my box, and she hasn't stopped eating them the whole time. So if I ask her, have you had enough, honey? And she says, kind of out of the blue, you might not understand this, I quote, some people are laughing because they've been to Maine and they know it's queer. There's a odd eccentricity, idiosyncrasy. When Mainers answer in the affirmative, they don't use a word; they just inhale. And I don't know what it is about Maine. It was something in the water or something in the blueberries that makes them do that. But she was born in Maine. She's my little blueberry bumpkin. She's got it. Yeah. So I believe her. So I pick her up, put her on my hip, and take my box with me, and I start to make up a new song. It's time to bring home the berries to put in the freezer. On a cold winter morning, I'll share them with you. You've eaten your fair share, you've had more than a few. If you eat any more, dear, you're gonna turn blue. And while I'm blubbering away in my blueberry baronial bliss, I drop my guard, and in that instant, bam! She's got her fist in there, smush it into her mouth, laughing as if to say, I guess I fooled you too. And I should have known, because I had yet to ever see that little blueberry addict ever decline a blueberry no matter how many she had eaten. So in addition to being her dad, I sort of feel like her dealer. And it remains my joy to keep that girl in berries. And I thought that, well, maybe the next year she'd be old enough to instill the idea of like picking for later, the idea of deferred gratification. But I realized the lessons are going both ways here. I might try to teach her, deferred gratification. She's instilling me carpe diem, to seize the moment. We were a good prayer, and that's why I declare that. Best blueberry season yet.
Hello. This is a story about old houses, second marriages, and squirrels. We were a Brady bunch, or so everyone said. I had 3 children from my first marriage, and my soon-to-be husband had 3 children as well. In the months leading up to our wedding, we worried a lot, most of all about the children. How would we create a blended family? How would everyone feel like they had space in our new lives? We also worried about where we would live. We looked for a house in Newton, and we found a large old house that had been on the market for a long time and had been largely neglected. We bought the house and moved in. We got married in the house, and then we began the work of repairing this large creature that had fallen to us. There were many surprises, as there are with old houses. There were some good surprises. We discovered that the house before we lived there had been a monastery, and that the financial records of the monastery were left behind in what I had always thought was the boiler, but turned out was a safe in the basement. We also found out that Timothy Leary had lived in the house for a year. Timothy Leary popularized LSD, it turned out, in our basement. There were also less exciting surprises along the lines of mildew and rotting floorboards and a crumbling structure. And I felt like my job in trying to create this blended family was to gain control over what felt entirely unwieldy. A lot of days this house felt like the most unwieldy child of all, the one in need of the most attention. But just as I was starting to feel that finally I had done it, we had done repairs, we had decided what could be ignored until later, when I started to feel that at last here was our home and here we were settling in with our children, the kids started to complain. They were hearing noises, they said, from the attic. At first, I told them it was just the sound of a house settling. Old houses do that, I think. and I ignored it. For weeks, I ignored the report of sounds. And then I heard it myself. It was unmistakable. The constant scurrying of little paws. We had squirrels. I called critter control, and two very nice men arrived with metal cages and bait. I learned that you are not allowed to kill squirrels in Newton. I did check. I did peruse the aisle of the hardware store, wondering how I might take care of the problem myself. But they set up traps all around the house, and we waited. We waited and waited. And one day, as I was pulling up the driveway of our house, I got a text saying we got one. And I walked in just as one of the men walked out with this little scared, scampering squirrel in a cage. And I felt terrible for it. They promised us that they would do no harm to the squirrels, but would drive them to some outer destination. It felt like that promise that dead pets go to some field in the sky. But I didn't ask questions. But that night, I worried about where this lone squirrel was, and I also worried about its mate, who I imagined somewhere in the expanse of our house, wondering where his friend had gone. It turned out I didn't need to worry because it was not just two squirrels. We were not the only large family in this house. The sounds increased. They were coming not just from the attic, but from the walls. In every room, this little scratchy, climby sound. Now, at the same time, around this time, my husband and I had been trying to figure out when we could go away for a week, a belated honeymoon. And we managed to carve out this 1 week when we could get away from everything. And so we left the house for a week. And before we left, I created order, which is always very important to me whenever I go away. I want to feel like I'm going to come home to something in control. And we came back a week later, tired and jet-lagged, but happy, to what was supposed to be perfect order. I went into our bedroom where I had made up our bed with its white, pristine bedspread. And there on the bed was a package of chocolate X-Lax. I didn't remember that we had X-Lax, but then I remembered there had been an old package sealed and unused in a drawer. I looked at the package. It was not sealed anymore. It was chewed open, bitten. One chocolate square remained. The silver foil was shredded all over the floor. We followed the trail of silver foil from room to room. And in every room, on my daughter's bed, everywhere we looked, small black pellets. I didn't know that squirrels suffer from constipation, but trust me when I tell you that for these squirrels, this ailment was entirely cured. We cleaned the house, we lysoled every surface. We repaired the holes through which the squirrels were gaining entry. We trapped the remaining squirrels, but they left behind something beside those pellets. They made me realize that our families, our lives, are never impermeable. You can close off all the holes, but you can never seal yourself completely off. Thank you.
Well, the story is about a bantam hen who was housed in our third grade classroom, and with 23 other children and myself. Well, the bantam hen required care. Oh, you wouldn't believe how well she was cared for, because she produced an egg a day. Now imagine an egg a day. What do you do with them? Well, in that school, we had a refrigerator, and we saved up the bantam hen eggs. On weekends, the bantam hen named Chatterbox went home for home visits and sleepovers. And of course, the parents loved Chatterbox and became part of the year's family. And then, when you get an egg a day, you should eat them sometimes. we had 33 eggs. What do you do with 33 eggs? Well, what you do is you ask the kids, go home, bring in recipes. And so they did. You have your recipe for 33 eggs. Well, we had a pancake breakfast recipe. We had a recipe for egg salad. You name it, we could have written a book, which we did. But what won out was a 3-tiered wedding cake. Who wouldn't want a 3-tier wedding cake when you're 8 going online? They all voted for it. And so, my goodness, how do you make a 3-tiered wedding cake without a wedding? So, needless to say, we had to write a play about a prince and princess, and of course they had to get married somewhere. And so the 3-tiered cake got made, and we had to have a wedding. And the wedding was in the auditorium of the school. And we had guests galore. The whole school came, and we celebrated together, and everybody got a slice of that wonderful, wonderful cake. And Chatterbox lived happily ever after.
Well, we were sitting around our dining room table just finishing up dinner with my in-laws, and the phone rang. And it was a Thursday night in June in 2009, and my spouse Lauren went and answered it. And there was a woman on the other end of the phone who said, "You've just been chosen to be the parents of a 6-week-old baby boy. Are you interested?" And Lauren said immediately yes. And the woman quickly replied, "Well, then you have to be here by tomorrow." And I hear Lauren saying, "Well, where's here?" And then I heard her say, "Bainbridge Island, an island off the coast of Seattle, Washington?" Now, then Lauren began to explain that we lived on Cape Cod, which was basically an island off the coast of Massachusetts, and she didn't think it was possible that we could get there by tomorrow. But the woman said it had to be tomorrow, and she wouldn't elaborate why, and she didn't have much information about the baby or its health or the birth mother. And when she hangs up the phone, I can hear the excitement in the room. My in-laws are scurrying to clean up dinner, and there's Lauren looking at me expectantly, and I'm frozen. It's like time stops, and the loss I felt that came welling up inside me from years of trying unsuccessfully to get pregnant was right there. And then I remember the time, even though we desperately wanted to become parents, when we turned down the opportunity to adopt a baby who had been born addicted to drugs because we sadly didn't think that we had what it took to give this child the extraordinary care that it would needed. And then all of a sudden fear grips me, and I remember the moment 2 months earlier when we got a similar phone call and to adopt another child, only later find out it was a scam. And so I just looked at Lauren and I said, I can't do it. I can't go through it again. And in her wise, kind way, she just looked at me and she said, "Lynn," she said, "what do we have to lose? Just a weekend and the cost of a flight. What if this is it? What if this is the one?" And so I like to be in control of things and make the decisions, but somehow in this moment I just let go and I let her make the decision because she had the strength to bear it. So it's late on a Thursday night and she ran out to Babies R Us because we have nothing. And I snap out of it and I get online and looking for a flight out the next morning. And we pack up all our things and the stuff she brings back from the store and our paperwork, and by 4:30 in the morning we're we're driving north, and we drop off our two puppies at a kennel, and by 7 a.m., miraculously, we are sitting on a plane about to take off on a direct flight for Seattle, never having slept. And shortly into the flight, I realized, whoa, we haven't picked out a name. And so I grabbed the throw-up bag from the seat pocket in front of me. We start scribbling down all these boys' names that we like. And towards the end of the flight, my emotions had done a 180. And now my hopes are up dangerously high. And I'm really excited but anxious. So the plane lands and we race off and we go to the rental car place. We get a rental car. We race to the harbor to catch a ferry out to the island. And we pull into the harbor and we see the ferry boat pulling away. And we know the adoption agency closes at 5 p.m. and it's a Friday. So the nice attendant tells us, well, if you go to the next harbor a little bit further north, you can still catch one. So we race off there like the adrenaline pumping. We get on and we get off on the island. We race completely harried and we pull into the parking lot, and we walk in totally unprepared. And a woman there is holding a little brown baby wrapped in a bundle, and she puts him in Lauren's arms. And a moment later, she put him in my arms, and I looked. And his mouth was open, and his eyes were closed, and his head was limp, and his head was kind of lolled back, and it was panic, because he didn't look well. Like, what was wrong with this child? And so they sit us down, and we're kind of in shock, and we hadn't slept. This was less than 24 hours later. We're at this table, and the woman explains to us that had we not gotten there today, the court system was going to place this baby into the care of the foster care system, and his life would go in a dramatically different, much more difficult direction. And she has us sign some paperwork, and I'm still kind of stunned and shocked, and about 20 minutes later of niceties, she stands up and she says, well, we're closed for the weekend. Here's your temporary custody papers. Take the baby, come back on Monday at 2, and we'll finish the rest of the paperwork. And she shuffles us out the door. And now we're outside, and I have a baby. And I'm looking at him, and what if he's not well? And she didn't give us the instruction manual. There was no baby directions. I'm like, where's the baby directions? Like, this was 24 hours. We didn't even have a car seat until 8 p.m. the night before. So we get this baby, and we find a motel, one-room motel room with just, a microwave and nothing else. And we spend an anxious weekend doting on him and arguing about how to change the diaper and calling my sister-in-law every 3 hours to ask, what the proper way is to swaddle a baby, how frequently you're supposed to feed a baby, the proper burping techniques. And little by little, over the course of that weekend, his, wariness and the fright in his eye about who we were and where he was started to give way, and his half smile started to relax, and he had a few giggles, and he started to show this very sweet disposition. And by Monday, I was a goner. By Monday, he was mine, and we walked back into that adoption agency, and I was confident and radiant, and nothing was going to separate us. Today, he's 8 years old, and he's the center of our lives. And every time I look at him, I am reminded that when I am in despair, or when I think I'm on my knees or on my last leg, that's the time I need to take a deep breath, take a brave step forward, and take that leap of faith, because that's where the gold is. Thank you.
When I was a young man, once. Some say I was a handful. My mother had in Italian stronger words for me, and I got in a lot of trouble in and out of school. And when I graduated from high school, I think I was 53 out of a class of 51, and we didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't go to college, so I said, well, I'll go into the Navy, and when I get out, I'll take advantage of the government helping me pay for college, which they did, by the way. One thing they've done right, or maybe it was not so good. Anyway, the Navy in its infinite wisdom sent me to Guam, where I spent a wonderful 18 months in blistering heat and jungle. And because they felt so badly about it, then they sent me to Adak, Alaska, out in the Aleutian Islands. Now, ADAC is halfway between the United States and Russia. And in those days, we kind of kept an eye on Russia. And today's Navy probably keeps one eye on Russia and the other on Sarah Palin. But anyway, it was very isolated duty. I can't tell you how remote it was. And it's only 12 months because it is such a terrible duty. I had 6 months left to go on my enlistment. And again, the Navy, in its infinite wisdom, sent me a note and said, if you extend for 2 more years off this 4-year hitch, we'll send you to Hawaii. And I said to them, thank you. I've been to Hawaii. So they left me there. Month 14. It's getting difficult. So I said, I'm going to put in for 30 days leave. They're not going to send me back to Adak, Alaska for a month, are they? So I put in for leave, and I decided to go home. Called a friend of mine. He's going to pick me up at Logan Airport. Going to surprise my mother. So he picks me up. We go, drive into the driveway. He waits in the car. And I go up and knock on the door. And suddenly the door opens, and there is this lovely blonde lady, about my age, maybe a year or two older. And the mind is a computer. And through microseconds, all of these things are going through my head. Who is this woman? Did my sister find out I was coming? Is this a gift? And I mean, I was 22, and I'd just been 14 months in isolation. I might as well have been in prison. And she says, may I help you? She said, actually, she said, yes, may I help you? And I'm saying, oh, God, I hope. So I said, I live here. And she said, no, you don't. I live here. You must be Lyons. Well, yeah. Oh, we bought the house a couple of months ago. Well, do you happen to know where they went? No clue. So I did thank her, disappointed, by the way. Went back and sat in my friend's car, and he said, who's that? I said, I have no idea, but I don't live here anymore. And he says, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to go back and talk to her, but I said, let's go to my sister's house in the next town. So we went to my sister's house, and she was all happy that I was there, and we chatted, we had coffee, and about an hour later I said, Carolyn, do you happen to know where your mother is? And she started laughing, and she said, well, they moved. Well, yeah. I said, I have no place to live. She says, they moved over to this town, we'll go over there. So she brings me over, I go in the house, and there's this amazing surprised look on my mother's face. Now, it could be interpreted a number of ways, one of which is she's surprised that I'm there and she's happy and shocked, or it could be, how the hell did you find me? Especially given my youth. So, over time, they said that they sent a letter. It must have got shuffled between my coming and going. And to this day, I am still waiting for that letter.
Hi. So, I have a fear of flying. Well, it's really a fear of dying, but it really comes to the fore when I'm on an airplane. Takeoffs are really bad, but I can usually white knuckle it through the 20 minutes until we reach cruising altitude, and then I can relax. But turbulence makes me nuts. I can't really explain it. But my palms get all sweaty, and I have to wipe them on my pants, and I become a lapsed atheist. I do. I start praying. I start dear God, if you could see me through this, I'll fix the things that are still broken in my life. And thankfully, God doesn't hold me to it. And so really the only thing that calms me down is to talk. I mean, not like this, but to actually have a conversation with somebody. And I don't have to be doing the talking. I can be doing the listening but it needs to be that social interaction, because it forces me to pay attention to what someone's saying, and gets me out of my head, and part of it's just like, when I'm in a plane, like it's a small plane, like a prop plane that I've been on, like that's actually okay, like, because when those are bouncing around, it kind of reminds me of like the balsa wood airplanes that I used to fly as a kid. Like, it makes sense that the wind can knock them around, but when you're flying in these things that are like enormous buildings that happen to have wings, and they're bumping around a lot, it's like, I don't know, I'm just really aware of these powerful forces that are just outside of that like thin metal shell, and how I have no control over them. So talking to people calms me down, and so I meet a lot of strangers this way. There was this one flight, I was on a red eye from San Francisco, and we're at the gate, and the pilot comes on and he explains that due to the severe weather patterns that are on the West Coast, the flight attendants were going to have to remain seated for the first hour or two of the flight. And I turned to the woman sitting next to me and I said, I sure hope you weren't planning on sleeping. And she was nice, she was great. She understood, and we had a really nice conversation, and it wasn't even so bad. It was more like, 45 minutes. But then there was this one time, it was about 10 years ago. I was in Boston, and I was taking a flight to Atlanta, and we had pulled over on the tarmac, which was a clear sign that something was up. And they explained that there was a mechanical issue with the plane, and they were going to have to get maintenance to come out before we could take off. And I knew that was going to take a while, and it was, they probably weren't going to fix it to my satisfaction. And so I was like, well, I better get started. And I turned to the man sitting next to me, and he was a black evangelical minister of a church in Atlanta. And I'm a white gay man with 2 black adopted kids from Cambridge. And initially, when we're talking, I wouldn't lie to him, but I didn't feel comfortable being open with him because I didn't know how he felt. And so I let him believe that I was married to a woman, and I let him believe that my children were white. But then that just seemed wrong, because it was. But I also was like, what am I afraid of? Like, he's a complete stranger, and we can have a conversation. And the worst that would happen was to just be an uncomfortable flight for 3 hours. And so I opened up to him, and I told him what my family was like. And he was honest with me. He said that he did not approve of same-sex relationships, and he did not agree that we deserved marriage rights, and he did not think we should be raising children. So, we were pretty far apart in our points of view, and I knew that I wasn't going to change his mind. He wasn't going to, join me in a PFLAG meeting or anything, but we could talk to each other, and we did, and it was really polite and respectful. He wasn't mean or rude. There was no yelling or screaming. We were just talking to each other. And at one point he said that he was uncomfortable that the gay rights movement had co-opted the language of the civil rights struggle. And I said, well, I can understand your point of view, but what do you want us to call it if it's not civil rights? And then he was talking about what it was like for him with a daughter. He had a daughter. His wife had died early, and so he was a single parent. He had a child, and I said, well, I can understand that because I have a black child as well, a black girl, and what do you do about the hair? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, it's such a production. Like, I spend all weekend unbraiding it and washing it out and then braiding it back up again. And he said, you braid your daughter's hair? And I was like, well, yeah, what do you do? And he said, no one ever taught me how to braid. How did you learn? And I was like, well, some black women at her daycare took pity on me, and so they taught me. And he said, you braid your daughter's hair. You're all right. Thank you. I needed some serious healthcare procedures done to me, so I had to go into the VA hospital in Jamaica Plain for some pre-testing. And I've learned that whenever you go for anything bureaucratic or medical, you'll be there a while, unless you bring a book. And the bigger a book you bring, the quicker they take you in. So I brought one of the larger Harry Potters. This was so large that you didn't carry it in a book bag. It had straps and you just wore it like a backpack. And I came into the VA hospital and found the department and had an interview with the physician's assistant, a very nice young man who explained all the different tests and procedures I had to go through. And then I went on this little merry-go-round of going here and there and there and there. And one of the tests was an EKG, electrocardiogram. And I've had them before, and if you've never had one, I'll explain. They glue these little adhesive discs to you, and in the middle is a little round metal thing like a snap fastener where they fasten the electrode to. And I've always wondered, well, what do they do with them afterwards? And the nurse who was giving me the test was this very nice young woman who noticed my book and said, oh, Harry Potter. So we had this really nice conversation about Harry Potter, and I figured she was pretty cool. So when the test was over, I said, what do you do with these discs? Do you reuse them? And she said, oh, God, no, we throw them out. I said, well, if you're going to throw them out, do you mind if I keep them? And she said, sure. So I should have taken the time to peel them off and store them, but I didn't. I just put on my shirt. And I went on the round of the next test and the next test and the next test, and now I'm all done, and I'm standing at the desk of the departmental secretary who's making some sort of appointment or something, and there's like a nurse standing next to me, there's a female nurse, two female doctors, a couple female nurses, and the physician's assistant, who, as you remember, is male. And suddenly, out of nowhere, he just says, how many nipples do you have anyway? And the heads of all the other medical professionals who were female just swiveled around and pointed at him like guns on an angry battleship. And he just kind of gulped and slunk away before I could explain. Now, I'm kind of old school. I'm not really big on taking selfies. If it's October 23rd, I've just swum a mile in Walden Pond, I might take a selfie to prove that it's the second half of October and I'm still swimming outdoors without a wetsuit. But I will admit, I went home from the VA hospital and I took a selfie with the caption, now with extra nipples.
So I never understood, it took me a long time to realize what an important role Sandy Koufax played in my life. I grew up in Brooklyn in an apartment house. We were 4 children in 2 bedrooms, and it was really marvelous. It was the kind of place that when you wanted to find a friend, you went outside, and there were always kids outside. Even in the wintertime, all you had to do was go in the hallway, and there were kids in the hallway. So out of the blue one day, however, my father decided that with 3 brothers and 1 girl, it was time for Linda to have her own bedroom. And he announced that we were moving. And we were going to move to our own house. We were really getting up in this world, and we were going to move into our own house. And I was really devastated. But we moved into our own house. I had my own bedroom, totally miserable, because the 3 brothers were in one room, and I was isolated by myself in the other. And but fortunately, when my brother went out to play, he found a group of boys, and one of those boys was Sandy Koufax. So I went out to find out who his friends were, because there were no girls living in the new neighborhood. And before long, they were playing stickball. Now, any of you grew up in the city know what stickball is. You take a broom and you unscrew the wooden dowel, and you have a pink spalding, and you go in the middle of the street, and you mark bases, and you play baseball with the stickball. And I, being a younger sister, said, I want to play, can I play? And Sandy Koufax said to me, okay, taking pity on the younger sister, you go all the way down to the end of the street, and you can play down there. Well, I realized what was really happening was that by the time the ball came bouncing down the street, these guys could have run around the bases about 4 times. But I was happy to be included. And then I kind of grew up and got married and moved to Boston and downtown Boston. And gee, there were a lot of people around in Boston. And then one day, my husband out of the blue said, we're moving to Bangkok. He had been drafted, and we were going to Bangkok. But believe me, there are a lot of people in Bangkok, so I was never lonely there. And then we went to Buffalo, and that wasn't so bad because we had relatives there. But then again, out of the blue, these were the days when the husband came home and told the wife where they were going to live and expect the wives to find and create a new life. We really made it. We were moving to Newton, Massachusetts, and everybody congratulated us. And we had the big American dream: a house, a stoop. I had my own kind of stoop in front of my house. And so my husband went off to work Monday morning, and I did what I was used to doing: going outside and sitting on the stoop and waiting until something happened. But if you know Newton, nothing happened. Absolutely nobody came by with an apple pie. Nobody came by to meet me. The people were all much older than I was. They were in their 40s and their 50s, and they had absolutely no use for me. So into about 2 or 3 months of this, I was really pretty miserable. I was very lonely. And finally, I said, I've got to do something. And this was 1973, and I had been a history teacher, and I assumed the city must be getting ready for the bicentennial. For those of you who remember, 1976 was the 200th anniversary of the bicentennial. So I marched myself over to City Hall, walked into the mayor's office, it was 10-man, and I said, are you planning a bicentennial celebration? And they said, yes, we are. I said, I think maybe I would like to join the committee. All right, we'll interview you. Several days later, I got a telephone call, come into City Hall, which was really scary, and be interviewed. Walked into a room, and again, all these old people in their 40s and 50s were there. And they said to me, well, I think the job that you would really be terrific at would be to run the bicentennial parade. I said to myself, a parade? I grew up in Brooklyn. I've never seen a parade. I've never been to a parade. My mother never would take me to the Macy's Day Parade. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. I'd love to run the parade. So I went back into Teddy Mann and said, they've accepted me. I'm running the parade. He said, well, then I need you to go meet a person named Fats Pellegrini. I said, okay, Fats Pellegrini, where do I meet him? He said, there's a bar on West Street in Nonantum, and you make an appointment to go see Fats Pellegrini. So I walk into the bar a little bit while later, looking for a big fat guy, and a skinny little guy is there. And I said, are you Fats Pellegrini? He said, yeah, babe, what do you want? I've already heard the noise, and so I'm just going to wind it up and say what I did really, and how this festival came to be and everything else, and how my life developed here, is I learned I had to get off the stoop. I learned also you had to say yes to running parades that you never had any idea about what to do. And also you have to open up your heart and say yes to anybody else who wants to work with you, because they have a lot of talent. So thank you very much.
Hi, I am Jerry's sister. I'm the oldest of 7 children. And at the time of this story, there were only 3 of us. I was 5 years old. I had a sister who was almost 4 and a brother who was 6 months old. We lived on the top floor of one of these 3-deckers in Mission Hill. In fact, we were up near the top of Mission Hill on Hillside Street, if anyone knows that area. My parents lived in my grandmother's house. My grandmother was on actually below ground level. They called it a 3-story, but there was another apartment in the basement. And my mother had these 3 little kids, and sometimes she needed some milk or bread, and getting the kids together to go out was really a big deal. So she would stand at the top of the stairs and yell, "Ma! Ma!" And my grandmother would come out and she'd, "Ma, will you go get me some milk or some bread?" Or sometimes she'd yell, "Ma, come up here for a few minutes," so she could go across the street, there was a little grocery store, to get whatever was needed. Well, my grandparents sold the house and moved. We thought they moved to the country. They were in Arlington on an acre of land. But they moved out to Arlington, so she didn't have Ma there anymore to go to the store, but she still had these kids to deal with if she wanted to get anything done. So she decided that I was old enough to cross the street. It was a little street, very little traffic, and we practiced looking both ways and all of this. So, and of course, I'm getting a real puffed head about this. Now, some of this my mother has filled in for me, but I do remember feeling like I am such a big girl. I'm going to go to the store. So she gave me a note and she gave me some money. And, now what are you going to do? I'm going to look both ways and then I'll cross and I'll give the note to the man in the store. So I went down the 3 flights of stairs and another flight from the front door to the sidewalk. And there were always cars parked along the street. So I walked out between 2 cars, and I turned and waved at my mother in the window, and then I stepped out and got hit by a car. And my mother was watching it. So I had a broken arm and a concussion. What I remember is waving, and then I woke up thinking, why did Mommy bring the baby down here? Because she had grabbed the little one and run downstairs to see what was going on. The outcome of that was I didn't get to be the big girl anymore. I was not allowed to go to that store until we moved to another place that it was less dangerous to go to a store. That was my out of the blue moment.
Well, I like to bend themes and break rules and just be well, I used to, but so taking the theme out of the blue, I came up with a theme out of the blues, out of the black. Let me start with out of the blues. No, actually, let me start with the blues because before I got out of them, I'm 15 years old, and I gotta tell you, I came from a dysfunctional family. Reminds me of a cartoon. There's this huge auditorium with a big banner, Functional Families of America. one set of people in there. Anyway, but I really got to me as an early adolescent, and I was in a really bad mood. I mean, a terrible funk. But it's Friday night in the spring of 1965, and the fellas come by. That was my high school neighborhood buddies. Hey, it's Friday, let's go do something. Well, we didn't have too many choices in Spring Valley, 20 miles north of New York City, exit 14 on the thruway. The only choice we had was the official high school hangout, the Tiger's Den. And we knew exactly what we'd find there, which is the same thing we found every weekend, so it was boring. But we went, and we walked back. And this is Spring Valley, so there's no sidewalks. And it's nighttime, so now we're getting into out of the black. What came out of the black, you'll find out in a second. So we're walking home on the right-hand side of the street, i.e. facing traffic. And we're about halfway up the block towards where our development starts. And one of the guys say, hey, let's go over to my house, we can watch some TV. So I'm still in my funk, and I didn't really sleep well the night before. And I said, nah, guys, I think I'm going to go home. Okay, so I cross the street. So I'm on the left-hand side of the street near the curb. And they're on the right-hand side of the street. Here comes the out of the black part. Black referring to the fact that it was night. A guy that was 2 years ahead of us turns down a road and comes barreling down the road. This will be the second hit by a car story. Because he sees my friend, so he must have swerved over to the left. Just at the moment he was passing the house of this girl from our class that had been going out with him, who dropped him. So he was probably looking over there to see if the lights were on, because he never beeped his horn. And I apparently heard the screeching of the brakes, and I say apparently because I don't remember very much of this night, because I put my hand out, which saved my life, and my handprint was embedded in his hood. And I got knocked. It really sounded spectacular from what my friends told me. I was like 30 feet down the road. And I'm lying there, my shirt's torn, my jacket's torn, my shoes got knocked off. But the next thing I know, I'm waking up sometime the next day in the hospital, looking up at my mom. You know who we are? Yeah, you're my mom. That's my dad. And it took about a few times for the sorters thinking, you were hit by a car, you were hit by a car. But I happened to be in really good shape. I'd been wrestling for a couple of years and lifting weights, and I really wasn't hurt that badly. So the point of it is, I go from a pre-adolescent deep funk, into shock, and then out of the hospital in a week, and all of a sudden, all these kids, like the jocks, the superstars, and the real popular kids that would never talk to me, came up to me, wow, I can't believe you're still alive, So I'm a superhero! No more adolescent funk. And that lasted long enough to propel me into this era called the 60s. And all of a sudden it's a summer of love and the Beatles are happening and I'm getting vehement about the Warren Band. I got a whole social scene and life is good. But this is actually really interesting. It goes deeper. It's about the universe takes care of you. So not only did I get out of my funk, because who knows where that would have went, but three other amazing benefits of this. 1969, I'm in college. I'm in a work-study program, and I haven't been on campus long enough to get my student deferment. And, that was the year they instituted the lottery approach to the draft. So based on your birthday, you're assigned a number, and based on my birthday, I'm number 61. So guess what? I'm 1A, and they're going to call me. Well, I wasn't a peace-love kind of, 60s guy, but luckily I had political parents, and I was aware of how wrong the war in Vietnam was, and there was no way I was going to go. So I'm either going to go to jail or go to Canada, and when I remembered, wait a minute, I got hit by a car. I had the doctor send the records, so they changed me to a 1Y, only to be called in case of national emergency. And the third benefit was, finally, there was an accident settlement, and I took a jaunt to Europe and spent a month riding a motorcycle around Crete. So life is good. Thank you.
Good evening. So this is not new, being in front of a room full of people, but it is a little bit different trying to figure out a story to tell. They sent me the email and they said, tell us a story about ministry. And for lots of reasons, I can't tell you names of anything, but I started to think about the fact that in seminary they prepare us to read narratives, but they don't really prepare us to tell stories. They prepare us to investigate text, but they don't really prepare us to tell stories. And one of the things they really don't prepare us to do is to handle the things that come up out of the blue, is to handle the things that come up when you make a living walking with people through all of the stories that they've told. So thank you for your stories. I'm going to tell you one of my own. Seminary did teach me a lot of things. It taught me introduced me to a lot of wonderful ideas and a lot of wonderful books, and it also taught me to hate the sound of my phone ringing. It taught me to hate the sound of my phone ringing because I never know what's happening on the other end. Sometimes it's a wonderful thing that's happening, a wonderful surprise is coming, a baby is being born, somebody's getting a promotion, something wonderful is going on. And sometimes it means that something terrible has happened, and they want you to jump up out of the bed in the middle of the night, throw some clothes on, maybe not, wipe your eyes, maybe run a washcloth across your face, and get there. But one of the reasons most recently why I've come to hate the sound of my phone ringing is because it means that something out of the blue has changed. Something out of the blue has been taken away from me. And most recently, out of the blue, my godmother died. So out of the blue, I was calling my dad. Actually, it wasn't really out of the blue. It's a routine that we've had since I went to college in D.C. I moved away from Athens, Georgia, and I went to school, and my father called me every day. He knew my schedule. He learned my routines and my patterns. He knew when to expect a call and when my answer the phone whisper, hey, Dad, I'll call you right back, I promise, meant that I was out doing something wonderful and something fun and investigating a new space. So I called him on Monday, as is our routine. I've called him every day on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 10 years. And this time, out of the blue, I heard my mother screaming in the background. Screaming because her best friend was in the hospital. Screaming not really out of any sort of particular shock, but screaming because she couldn't hear the person on the other end of the phone, and she was trying to figure out what was going on. And out of the blue, everything in my life shifted because Auntie Margie was everything to me. Auntie Margie was there when I went through adolescence and my mother and I didn't like each other so much. Auntie Margie was there when I was going through all sorts of things. You have to understand that my godmother didn't have any children of her own, and so I was her baby. I got to be a baby in her house where I didn't get to be the baby because I'm the oldest of 3 girls. So I got to be her baby, and it was a wonderful thing. I love my mother, don't get me wrong, but we're very much alike. If you understand, you have children, you know what that means. So I love my mother, but we are the same person. So it gets a little difficult sometimes, but she called me and she said, well, Daddy called me, and I was on the phone with him, and he said, I'll call you right back. We'll call you back when we know something. And out of the blue, everything started moving because I was just thinking, as they teach you in seminary, that you must go to prayer. You must go to a text. There's something in there that'll teach you something about how to deal with this situation. Then I got a call back, sort of out of the blue, from my mother about 10:30, and she said, Auntie Margie has advanced metastatic breast cancer. And it was in her liver, in her lungs, in her brain before they even found it. And out of the blue, everything changed because I didn't know that she was going through any of that. Because out of the blue, 2 weeks after she had her diagnosis, she was in the hospital, unable to speak, unable to recognize her family and her friends. And then at 10:30 the next morning, out of the blue, she was gone, and everything had changed. And they teach you how to read narratives. They teach you how to read text. They don't teach you what to do when everything under your feet shifts out of the blue. But what I hope that you understand, if you've never been to seminary, but I know that you've been through a school of hard knocks somewhere in your life, that life has taught you that things will happen out of the blue. Things that are completely out of your control will happen out of the blue. But things that happen out of the blue teach you that you are made of something wonderful. They teach you that you are made of something magical. They teach you things that you could never learn in a book. They teach you things that you could never learn anywhere else, except when something sweeps you off your feet, knocks you to your knees, and all you have left is the magic inside of you. So I hope that at some point in your life you find something that happens to you out of the blue and it changes you. I don't hope that because you experience pain. Unfortunately, we all will, and everyone in here knows that. But the thing that I hope that you do discover is that out of the blue, wonderful things can happen. Out of the blue, you can see your world change, and yet you see a miracle be born. Because out of the blue, there are things that become revealed. There are things that become new out of the blue. I hope that you always find that out of the blue, the gold comes out. Out of the blue, your magic is there. Out of the blue, somebody will show you somewhere miraculously that they love you in a way you never thought possible. God bless you.
My story is about what happened when my children, who had been born in the middle of the woods in the Adirondack Park, when we decided that we wanted to show them a little bit more of the world. So my husband and I drove down 5 hours to Newton, where my father lives, who told about the chatterbox. And we left the kids with my parents, and we went to a big, international school conference. And before we had gone to the conference, we had gotten the book, and we had, gone through all the schools and picked out our favorite schools, which ones we would like to live in. Most of them were in Europe, like Norway and Sweden and places like that. And so when we got to the conference, they told us, just sign yourself up for interviews. So we got into the room where you signed up, and there were tables, and above each table was the title of the school and where they were located. So we looked. The ones with, from Europe, like Norway, there was a line that went out the door. It was very long. And then there was, a few tables over on the sides that had nobody. So my husband, being very practical, said, I'm going to go sign us up for all the tables with no people in the lines, because we'll get a lot more interviews. And I said, oh no, I'm just going to stay right here in the Norway one. So I signed us up for one interview with Norway. Oh no, it was Finland. And then he signed us up for like 5 or 7 more interviews, but places that had no lines. Well, turns out there was a, well, so we went to the we went to the Finland interview, and they were interested in us. And then we went to all the other ones: Nicaragua, El Salvador, Colombia, and several others. And before we left the interview time, we already had several offers. And my husband, being who he was, said, I think we should just take one of these offers, because who knows if we're going to get the offer from Finland. So we did end up going to El Salvador. And we stayed there for 3 years, and my girls learned Spanish, and one of my girls works as the coordinator between the front of a restaurant and the back of a restaurant. The back of the restaurant speaks all Spanish, the front speaks all English, so her Spanish came very handy. And my other daughter went to Peace Corps, and she went to Paraguay, where they don't actually speak Spanish, but she thought they did. And so anyway, as it all turned out, it worked out fine, and we had a really amazing time. We learned a lot about a culture we never would have found out about.
I think I'm going to tell you a story. So, we moved to Newton about 9 years ago, and when we bought the house, we were aware that the house across the street was kind of derelict and, kind of ramshackle. And they said Rudy lived there, he's lived there his whole life, and, that was it. So we pulled in the day we moved in with the moving truck. We get out of the car. As soon as I get out of the car, across the street, there's 4 or 5 guys, about 50 years old, all drinking beer. One of them jumps up, comes over, and says, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Johnny. Welcome to the neighborhood." And that was Johnny Golding. That's the first day I ever met him. So over the next few months, anytime Johnny was visiting, if I turned up or Mari turned up, he would kind of come running over, and he was just this ball of enthusiasm. And he's always saying, "You need any work, I can do it. You need painting, I do carpentry, I do masonry, I'll give you a good price." And he's always badgering me, not badgering, but, trying to sell himself. So about 3 months after we were there, we decided to paint my daughter's room. She was about 6 years old. She wanted painted pink. So I said to Mari, why don't we hire Johnny for this? It's like kind of a low-risk job. If he botches it, it's not a big deal. And if he does a good job, then we got a handyman right across the street. So we hired Johnny. He shows up on the day, all this painting stuff, and gets set up upstairs. And I'm working home down in the office downstairs. He comes down a few minutes later. He says, "Do you have any music? I like working with music." And I said, "I got the iPod here," and I just let it play all day long. I said, "If you want, I got this little box. You plug it in upstairs, you'll get my feed off the iPod." Great. So all that day, I'm working, the music's playing, and I can hear Johnny singing his heart out upstairs and whistling. He was a happy man, happy at his work. So it turned out it'd be a beautiful job. He gave us a great price, and we were thrilled with it. So he became kind of our go-to handyman for little jobs around the house. But meanwhile, he was like, my daughter kind of, she got a real kick out of him, because he was always, would kind of focus on her, and he heard she was taking piano lessons. He got all excited. He's like, "Oh, let me talk to her. And he goes, "Hey, think about piano. There's all kinds of pianos. There's classical piano, there's jazz piano, but there's rock and roll piano. Jerry Lee Lewis, he was a madman, banging with the thing." And my daughter's just like, but she liked it, And he, another day he sort of turned up, I'm going to build the kid a swing set. And he built out of this kind of not pressure treated, just regular old lumber that he got from somewhere, the funniest looking swing you ever saw. But she loved it, and it was kind of, it was a nice thing to do. So anyway, about a year later, a year after we moved in, one day I come in, he says, "Jerry, you're going to let me paint the house. Your house needs a paint job." I'm like, "Oh, I don't have the money for that, Johnny." No, come on now. And I said, "Well, how about the trim?" No, you got to let me paint the whole house. I'll give you a good price." So he wears me down. I say, "All right, fine." He starts painting the back of the house. He works for about a day, and then it starts raining, kind of like what just happened here. It rains for like a week. And I forgot all about Johnny. It comes Friday. I'm working. The phone rings. The sun's starting to come out. He says, "Oh, Jared, it's Johnny. I was going to start painting again today. I feel bad, though. I'm not feeling good." And I said, "Don't worry about it, Johnny. Whenever you can come over." "Okay, all right. Do you have any aspirin?" And I said, "Yeah, just come. You Rudy's? Yeah. Come ring the doorbell. I'll get it for you." He said, you think you can bring it over? I'm like, what is this? I think I'm having a heart attack. So I freak out, I run upstairs, I grab the aspirin, I go charging across the street into the house. I've never been in this house. Open the door, and man, it's kind of a scene. Yell, and there's nobody there. All the way in the back of the house, there's Johnny. He's looking terrible. He's all sweaty and gray. And I said, John, let me call you an ambulance. No, don't, man. No ambulance. And I said, well, we got to get you to the hospital. No, I got a flu. I said, you just had a heart attack. No, I just threw up. It's a flu. Maybe I'm a little hungover, too. And I'm like, you just threw up? And he said, yeah. And I say, you still don't look good. Let me take you to the emergency room. No, I'm not going to the emergency room. And so we're going back and forth. And he convinces me he's just got a flu. And I said, well, look, keep the phone there. You need me for anything, I'm just across the street. So I go home and go back to work. So it's Friday, like almost every Friday, good weather. The boys turn up across the street, late in the afternoon. They're out there drinking beer, but there's no Johnny. He apparently is still sick inside. About 6 o'clock that night, friends are coming for dinner. They come, they arrive, they're there about 5 minutes. The doorbell rings. I go to the door, and it's Rudy. He's completely out of his mind. Johnny's dead! Give me a phone! And I grab the phone, I dial 911, and I hand it to him. He's drunk, he's on the phone, he's talking to the operator, he's yelling, the operator's yelling at him, and all of a sudden he just gives me the phone. I give the phone, the operator says, you have to go in the house. I said, I'm the neighbor across, I don't care, go in the house, check the body. I'm like, so I go across the street, past all the guys, into the house, I go in the back, and there's Johnny, and I pick up his arm, and he is stone cold dead. And I tell the operator, she says, well, the ambulance is going to be there in a minute, and I go stumbling out of the house in a daze, past the guys across the street into my house. Just as I'm going to my house, ambulance comes around. Just behind that, 2 police cars. And all of a sudden, there's a scene. It's like 2 police cars, 5 drunk guys, and a dead body. It's a bad scene. And the police are getting, the guys are yelling, and just then a neighbor comes around the corner. He knows these guys. He sort of sees what's going on. He stops and he says, look, I'll get these guys out of here. The police said, you better get them out of here. Somebody's going to get arrested. And they take them away. And it was the most insane 5 or 10 minutes in my life, I think. It just all happened so fast. But Johnny, Johnny, he was a good guy. He was full of exuberance. He was full of energy in life. He died young. He was probably 50, 52. And he had a lot of miles on him. And he loved his music. He loved all kinds of music. And so, in the words of one of the bands he loved, Pink Floyd, shine on, you crazy diamond. Rest in peace, Johnny Golden.
A lot about what's going on now in our country, and it bothers me tremendously. And I was thinking about the storytelling and about some groups I worked with for several years in public housing. Some elderly people, others who were there for other reasons. And we worked on sort of what we're doing here tonight, except that they were kind of working through issues of their own. So I was, I would say maybe about 9 or 10 years ago, I was working with a group in public housing, and there was a woman who came into the group who had arrived just about a month before, and she was from Russia. She was small, round, she barely spoke a word of English, and couldn't understand very much either. But she came to every meeting. We did a lot of work in movement, in storytelling, although she couldn't do that, and in some of the arts. And she would sit and watch us. And she had the largest black eyes I've ever seen, and she was all there. She really wanted to participate in the worst way, and she was really, really listening. So I decided one time when I went, that I was going to bring in one of my favorite storytellers, J.O. Callahan, who's from this area, and he had a tape out, and it was about 3 people, in Nova Scotia who worked in a herring shed, and the name of the story was The Herring Shed. And he told the story in a kind of sing-song that was almost as much a song as talking. And it just grabbed you. It was enchanting. And the story was about these people and how they had gone through the Second World War and how they had contributed to it by working very, very long hours and losing people they loved in the war, but continuing to pursue their work in the herring shed as their way of offering something to bring peace to the world. So they listened to the story, they liked it, people talked about it afterward, and our Russian friend, whose name, by the way, was Razel, or it would be Rose in English, was watching so carefully, and she was sort of sitting up, and you could tell that there was something that was boiling in her. And all of a sudden, she just, I can't do it here, I'm sorry, but she just stood up and pushed the chair back, and everybody stopped and looked. Nobody knew what was going to come out of this. And as she stood up, and she went like this. Roof, roof, roof. And then she went. Child. And then she went. Roof, bum, bum, bum. And then she went. Child. Dead. War! War! That was it.
I walked in to my 5th grade classroom, and I saw on the blackboard there was something written in flowery script. Our teacher, Mrs. Ross, went to the front of the room, and in a very stern voice, she read, "Proclamation. From this day forth, all assignments must be submitted with a stamp attached. You can purchase these stamps by copying your spelling list 10 times. Penalties will be enforced, no exceptions. Signed, the Duchess of Ross." Now, my teacher, Mrs. Ross, well, she was new in the elementary school that year. But we kids soon found out that she was nice. She had a calm voice, and she never raised it, and she had good control of the class. So I had relaxed in her class, and I knew I could just enjoy learning about American history that year and complicated multiplication, and so I was just amazed when out of the blue she changed in her demeanor completely. Well, none of the kids in the room dared to question her openly at first. We just got to work. She told us we had to fill out worksheets, and for every worksheet, 10 times the spelling list, that was 100 words per assignment, and that's all she had us doing all day long. Worksheets, spelling lists, buy a stamp, submit it, do the next one, and if we didn't, we would get no credit for our work. We would get an F. Well, by the end of the day, I had writer's cramp, and I went home and I had to do homework, and I even started writing extra spelling lists just to try to get ahead. I didn't rebel, and, a second day went by, and all the kids were doing what she said. Half of our lives at that point had been spent in this school system that told us to obey, to respect the authority of the teacher, and I found that I was rewarded by good grades, and I liked that. Well, on the 3rd morning, I saw a few kids go over to the desk of the teacher, and they got a pass to go to the principal's office. Well, I found out later they had gone to implore him to intervene, and this teacher was just being so unreasonable. But apparently he told them no, he would back her up. But he gave them a hint. He said, check your history textbook. Well, that morning we had the assignment to read in our history textbook, and I was there reading about the Stamp Act and the Boston Tea Party. And by the time I was putting it all together, well, some of the other rebels had already gone over to the teacher's desk, and more of us jumped up, and we started throwing those stamps, dumping them into the garbage, and we were throwing our papers onto her desk and saying, "This is unfair. We won't do this anymore." Now, there were a few loyalists still at their desk, writing their spelling lists. But at that point, Mrs. Ross, the Duchess, well, she stood up and she looked at all of our angry faces and she said, "I don't want a war in our classroom. I hereby revoke the Stamp Act." Well, we all started cheering, and then one boy even climbed up on a chair and took down the American flag and started waving it about. And when this pandemonium settled down, she said to us, "So, how did it feel when you were told you had to pay a tax for every assignment? How did it feel to have to write those spelling words?" We said it was horrible. It was so mean. It was terrible. We hated it. She said, "Yeah, well, how do you think those colonists felt under British rule?" You know, I think Mrs. Ross was way ahead of her time. And she was revolutionary, in fact. Mrs. Ross, to this day, reminds me, especially in these times, to speak up if I sense an injustice, and to resist.
This is something that happened a little out of the blue to me last summer. When I was an angel, crafted, heavy white cardboard trimmed like a pair of fused tablets, white elastic straps affixed to one side, the other soft white feathers meticulously glued in rows. I don the wings and ethereal backpack. Initially they are a costume, a role. I am an actor in a theatrical production, a pathway to a Sabbath celebration, surrounded by an audience of white. As we walk, my friend and me, the wings are becoming part of us, but we don't know it yet. We are angels, still in the making. We stand at our station, a group of angels, Yom HaShishi, the 6th day. Last stop before Sabbath services. People arrive, and we extend our hands to those who wander by and pause. "Would you like a blessing?" I ask a young woman. "Yes," she says. I touch her head, and blessings come through me, and my hands, touching face, touching shoulders, touching souls. She blesses me in return, this angel without wings, late afternoon sun stroking my cheeks as it breaks free from confining rain clouds. Lines form as the blessings continue, no longer a performance, and I don't feel the wings on my back, but they are there. And then a man approaches. "I have a special blessing to request," he says. "My son died," he tells me. I exclaim, "My son died? When did you lose him?" He says, "Last month, 10 years ago. Tonight is his yahrzeit." He says, "I'd like a blessing to be able to let go, to be able to be who I was before." He tells me about his boy, his sweetness, his only child, felled at 20. My son was 18 when his breath was taken by an angel in the night. We share our mutual love for and anger with God, and I raise my hands to his head, silently blessing, moving to his face, his shoulders, and he reaches a hand toward my heart, and I feel reciprocal healing heat as I touch blessings through his body and soul, God running through me like blood and breath and hope, absolute absolution. We are lovers in grief now, a fierce, silent fire connecting, strengthening, as we move to embrace of heart, to soul, united by a loss none should ever understand. Everyone has passed through our station. My friend and I joined the walkers. Our angel wings have become us, and we soar. Inside the temple, we pray at the edge of concentric circles of white-clad bodies. We ascend to the balcony and gaze upon our joyous, chanting people. We are there, and another, a grieving woman in blue. You should bless her, my friend says. I approach. Would you like a blessing, I ask. I would love a blessing, she replies. And I sit beside her, reaching hands to her head. I feel the sadness, the pain. I absorb and share, loving as God streams through once more. Her tears flow as the blessing flows, infusing her, infusing me with holiness. And we too embrace scarred pain against new, soul-searing hope for times of easement. Standing with my friend, we turn our hands up to receive, thanking God for giving us the opportunity to bless. And we are all angels, and we are surrounded, dancing songs of joy and welcoming the Sabbath Queen into the room, into our hearts, alongside blessings given and received. And we flutter down, joining the circles of light.
Well, I told 3 years, but then another story. I was there before.